And Jewel, can you read the opening statement?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open this meeting and explain the rules for this electronic meeting. Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if your microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure the microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me at 540-336-3948 at any time during the meeting if you need technical support, and an IT tech will call your cell phone to assist. I now turn the meeting over to Committee Chairman Sultan.
In accordance with the governor's state of emergency declaration and executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Continuity Ordinance and General Assembly 2020 Budget Amendments 28 and 137, Loudoun Water will meet today in an electronic meeting. In compliance with these special procedures, only action items necessary to continue operation of Loudoun Water and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities will be discussed during today's meeting. Reports and other meeting information are available on board docs. Public notice and meeting access information was provided on the Loudoun Water website. A recording of the meeting will be available at this link at www.loudounwater.org/virtual-meetings-recordings. Board members wishing to speak are reminded to press unmute and identify themselves by name so that staff can accurately capture comments. All items will be recommended to the July 8th, 2021 board meeting. The board secretary will now take a roll call attendance of the committee members.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sultan?
Here.
Mr. Bonfils?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
And Ms. Ursakar?
Here.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge that Chairman Koblis and Mr. Kelly are in attendance.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
This is Keith. I so move.
Get a second?
Second, Jim Bonfils.
Can we have a roll call?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Ursakar?
Yes.
And Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to action items. First one is approval of design task order for Selma Estates water treatment plant upgrades.
Good morning, everyone. Just waiting for approval for the teams before I get started.
Let's see. I didn't see it come up. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, it was on my screen, the presentation.
Are you able to request it again?
No, mine is just says wait. Oh, there we go. Excellent. So this morning I'll be seeking approval for a design task order for the Selma water treatment plant upgrades. Start off with a little background. The Selma and Raspberry Falls communities are located a little north of Leesburg along the Route 15 corridor, or just west. I mean, you can see where the star indicates these communities. Also have a little aerial map showing the communities. A little tough to see, but the treatment plant's right up here where my cursor is. So the Selma water treatment plant serves the Raspberry Falls and Selma Estates communities. It treats groundwaters from a variety of wells located through the communities and distributes that to the residents. And the average daily demand for this water treatment plant is about 110 gallons per minute, so a little over 150,000 gallons a day. Diving more into these flows, which is one of the main drivers of this project. We have 4 booster pumps that are expected to handle these flows. And as I mentioned, we have an average daily demand of 110, as you can see in this chart to the right. I'd also like to point your attention to just down at the bottom, these pumps also have to handle, peak hourly plus a fire flow of over 1,000 gallons per minute. So that's a pretty wide range of flows that are required for the existing pumps. On top of this, it's not uncommon during the days to see flows anywhere from 70 to 90 gallons per minute. So it's a pretty wide range for flows for the pumps to be handling. And existing pumps have an acceptable operating range of around 200 to 600 gallons a minute. So as you can see with these, where we're at, 95, 99% of the time, we're well below this acceptable operating range of the pumps. So that's causing issues. And leading into this next slide, going with the project drivers. The big goal of this project is just to increase the resiliency of the pumps and the control system. As I mentioned, the pumps are just oversized. We're going to see excessive turnover and cycling, decreased efficiency and decreased useful life. So the goal is just get something right sized, ideally. One other thing with this plant is it was built 15 plus years ago, and a lot of the control panel equipment is obsolete. So it has 15 plus years of service life. We're getting to the point where we won't be able to replace parts if anything happens. So as far from a reliability standpoint, we're going to need to upgrade some controls and control panel equipment in order to keep the plant serviceable. I see Mr. Copeless.
So I'm a little lost here. Didn't we maybe you need to explain this? Didn't we redo this entire water treatment plant a few years ago for Raspberry Falls? Why? And then my next question: if we didn't, why didn't we upgrade these pumps back when we were redoing the water treatment plant?
So you are correct. I think back in 2018 or so is when we could finish construction for the Selma. One of the reasons we didn't, mess with these pumps when we first started is, one, there was sort of a lack of understanding of the exact flows and how the system would perform and operate. We didn't have the greatest idea of the flow ranges and stuff like that and the pressures needed. So we weren't exactly sure the pumps and the pump capabilities. And additionally, when we did that upgrade, I think a lot of the driver was to help bring on the membrane plant or permanent membrane plant and additional treatment. And the goal is to try to keep the existing stuff, existing as is, so to say, and maintain operation while adding in additional features.
So we're not replacing anything new that we put in 3 years ago.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonfils?
Sure. Just a quick question. So, I was a little surprised when I read through this, as Mark was. The flows that were estimated in the 110 gallons per minute on average, for those several hundred homes, that seems low to me mentally. Could you go through that sizing?
This is just based off of what we've been seeing in the past. It might be, I think that's throughout the entire day, so it's not necessarily, obviously you're going to see that morning, evening peak. But this is just essentially based off the SCADA information we've been pulling for the past X amount of time and over the entire day. So
this is based on actuals. That's good. That's really good news.
Yeah.
That's great news. And I remember when we did this, we weren't sure what the flow was going to be 3 years ago. And these are really big pumps that the developer put in when they built that plant. Thanks very much. Appreciate your answer.
Yep. Okay, if that's it, I'm gonna go ahead and ask you another question.
Yeah, just brought up a good point. How much is factored in for growth? I know, I assume that area has been pretty stable, but I'm assuming there's a certain amount of contingency built in for growth for the pump, so we don't get to the opposite end of the equation where we're undersized.
Yeah, I think if you look at if I go back, on the high end range, we're not gonna change the pumps, or we're gonna leave enough booster pumps in place to handle, the max flows plus having a spare pump. Realistically, we don't see us ever actually having to turn on more than two pumps to actually handle any type of predictive flows. Additionally, this is sort of worst case scenario, and if we can handle that with two pumps, we feel comfortable having 3 pumps should be able to get us at through any type of situation.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I see a question from Mr. Kelly, I believe.
Thanks, Stefan. Good morning. I recall that, I don't know whether it was Raspberry Falls or Selma or both. There was a question back a few years ago that the use of outside water for watering lawns, washing cars, and things like that had to have some sort of restrictions on it. Is that still true, or has that gone away, or am I just imagining that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Kinsey or someone's on the call as well who can answer.
I think I remember that as just during the construction of the membrane plant, we put restrictions on the community, but after the plant was open, I believe that went away, but somebody else could say I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, Mark. I'm just curious if that's gone away, and the issue was potable water and so forth. They were trying to save it for in-house use. I'm just curious if that's gone away. If those pumps, these additional pumps, are to help that, or is it just like you said, the low flow considerations?
Hey, Stefan, Kinsey here. Hey guys, sorry my cam's not working today, but yes, we do allow outside watering. No permanent irrigation systems are allowed. That's why the system, we went from about 500 gallons per day per connection to 900 is to help support this. Any other questions about that?
No, thank you.
Great. And Mr. Sultan, I believe you have your hand up.
We're talking only about the pumps. Is there any problem with the well capacity itself?
Not that I believe. Kinsey, I'm not sure. You probably are the better one to answer this.
Hi, Mr. Sultan. No issues with well capacity. We are in a great position. Keep in mind these pumps, the big pumps are great for sending heavy flows. Selma Raspberry is on the bigger side now. There is really no off period. There's always some form of small demand. And these 2 new jockey pumps that Stefan's presenting on are to help these low flow periods. So there's always water movement. We really don't want to abuse these big pumps. We want to reserve these assets and take care of them and have a better fit for these 110 gallon per minute scenarios.
But you haven't experienced any problem with the wells themselves?
Nope, they're performing well.
Are there any other questions?
Great. All right. So moving on. So just looking at the scope of work for the design task order, we'll have our consultant do a hydraulic evaluation, determining optimal pump sizing, configurations, just based off the existing flows and pressures we need. As I mentioned, we're going to be, upgrading and replacing the obsolete pump controls. One of the big things for this project is developing a maintenance plant operations plan. We don't want to have any interruptions or anything with the water distribution during construction. So we really need to make sure we carefully think out and lay out this MOPO plan. And then obviously it's going to culminate in some drawings and specifications that will be publicly bid. From the permitting side of things, pretty minimal, just a VDH CTC. And then we'll have bid phase services, for any questions that come up, addendum need to be prepared. So I want to include a high level design and construction schedule. Design we're looking to go through early, quarter 1 next year. Look to bid it out in the spring and hopefully have this awarded about this time next year. And then construction, it's a little iffy. I think a lot of this just depends on some of the lead times we're seeing for equipment. We've been seeing quite some large lead times. So if that remains the case, we might see this construction period stretch out a bit into later next or 2023. But we should have more information on that, obviously, as we go through the design and see what the market's doing. So to give you a quick snapshot of this project, it's COM 56, and the drivers are to increase the operational efficiency and the resiliency. We do have $200,000 allocated for design services for 2021. And then just breaking down the task order fee. Not going through each of these line items individually, but we do have some basis design, so preliminary engineering and hydraulic analysis included, just to make sure you're getting the proper pumps, the proper equipment in there. Designs, the plans and specs, just under $74,000. So what, 60 or so % of the overall cost. We're getting 3 cost estimates done with this project. We figured with the volatility of the market, we like to have our finger on the pulse of where the costs might be coming in. And then just remaining, we have project management meetings, minimal permitting, and relatively minimal bid phase services, for a total of just under $124,000. I'm not sure if we have any questions on this, but this is my last slide before I go into the formal requests. We're looking for 5% contingency for a total authorized budget of $130,000. I'd be happy to answer any more questions at this point. Mr. Coppola?
Yes, did Carollo do the last design there, or is this a new group that's designing?
So this is one of our new BOAs from the 2020 BOA. Hazen was the one, I believe, that did the upgrades that started, I think, in 2015. We do one of Carollo's, the main project manager on this did work on the project, the upgrades project, so they have some knowledge to bring onto this project. But no, Carollo's a new firm for us.
And so what is the anticipated budget for construction?
So we have about $1 million in there for the CIP in 2022. It's tough to say. I think that might be I think that'd be the high range for this. I could see us being anywhere from 500,000 to $1 million. I think it's tough to say right now with the pumps and the control panel equipment what we're going to see for pricing, just due to the ongoing issues we've been having. So I could see higher end of that range if things hold.
So and then there'll be construction phase services, which could be another 3 or 4%. So you're basically saying the design fees are going to be in the 17-18% range on this project? Just seems high to me.
Up to that. I mean, yeah, I guess it all depends on where the construction comes in. Trying to compare this to.
It's never come in low, trust me.
Yeah,
not in the 12 years that I've been here.
I'm not trying to say that either. But we're trying to look at what other projects have had, and obviously there's no 2 projects that are exactly similar. And for obviously larger greenfield pump station projects, we've seen design phase services coming around 10%. For smaller upgrade projects like this, we've seen it be around 14 or so % of the overall construction cost. Just looking back once everything's done. So I think with this one, we're not too far away with that.
Okay.
There's some,
as long as you're comfortable with it. That's all I have.
Other questions?
Marty, are you ready for a motion?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to
I was waiting for it to come up on the screen. Can I get a motion?
It's up again. I make the recommended motion and request that it be placed on consent agenda.
Can I get a second? Oh, wait, Pam has a question.
No, actually, Marty, I wanted to wait until you finish this, and then I wanted to bring something up to the group.
Okay, can I get a second?
This is Keith, I'll second.
Okay, I got a second. Jewel, the roll call?
Thank you. Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar?
Yes.
And Mr. Sultan?
Yes, and I'm assuming we're putting this into the consent agenda.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Pam?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Stefan a question, and I'm not sure if Brian might be on as well. But I think that there was a point that Stefan brought up that might be interesting to the members here, and that is that we are starting to see some of these supply chain issues. I was just on a construction project meeting this week where we were talking about, and it's been going really smoothly and really fast, and we actually thought the contractor was going to be done ahead of time. And then they've had some heard of some issues, some supply chain issues where the valves are going to come in a lot later than what we thought. And it might be messing up our construction schedule. And I noticed, Stefan said the same thing about this, a little bit of uncertainty in the market about supply chain. And I was just wondering if I'm catching Brian by surprise or if anybody else. Stefan, did you have any more information about this supply chain issue that we're seeing?
Not too much. I can dive into the details. I just know on other projects, at least, been talking with our cost estimators and consultants, and they've just been seeing, much longer lead time for pumps,
Yes.
chips, equipment like that. And they're just saying it's something we need to factor into the schedule, and with longer schedule, increased budget. So.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I just wanted to apprise the members of that because, I think we had been pretty lucky to date, and I hadn't heard a lot of that, but I'm starting to hear that. Mr. Koblis has his hand up.
Yeah, Pam, actually, I'm starting to hear the opposite. I think the supply chain is actually moving in a better direction than it was 3 to 6 months. Now I'm talking about in building construction projects, which kind of encompasses some of the stuff. And yeah, there might be some unique things, some unique valves and things, but even lumber now is starting to come down. A lot of people were hoarding, and things that are changing. And especially for this project, it's so far in the future, I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
But that's just what I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just something that we need to keep our, pay attention to because, we like to be prepared and we like to have good schedules. And, we're always excited when a project comes in early. And in the one I'm thinking about, it doesn't look like it's going to help us. That's all.
Ms. Ursakar, you have a question?
It's not, yeah, it is a question, but also to add to the discussion we're having right now based on this topic. Pam, where were you getting your supply of the bulbs from?
So this, I'm not sure actually which,
Okay.
who the supplier is. It's,
Mhm.
this is the Goose Creek Connection project I'm talking about. And
Okay.
contractor's Garney. And apparently their supplier had told them originally, back many, many months ago when they started the project that there would not be a problem. But apparently that's changed between, I guess it was December when they put, or even earlier when they put that original bid. Yeah, it was earlier when they put that bid in. So, it could be their supplier is the issue. It may not be the market, back to Mark's point. It surprised me that I didn't expect that now. I guess I also thought that supply chain issues were kind of working their way out of this. So,
Right. It depends on the origin. Some things we are getting into the country, and there are certain countries that we are sort of not in a trade war, but we are sort of, in a, I would say in a rift with certain countries right now. Our neighboring border country, we are still in a rift with them about certain issues. So that, things coming from across the border, are taking longer, or it's a decline or a defer situation in supply management right now. I deal a lot with supply management with the federal agency that I work with, very deeply. So there, I will just say there's a lot of difference and there's a lot of denial at the same time, which is affecting. But to Mark's point, not every material, not every commodity that we have is impacted. So it's more situational, but in the sense that it depends on what origin it is coming from. So
that's really,
we
really
want to keep that in mind. Yeah.
helpful information. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Sultan, you have a question?
Yeah, we're talking about the schedule impacts. What about the price fluctuation on items that the contractors are receiving?
I'm thinking in the particular case that I'm talking about, it's, you know, it was a bid that was worked into our bid. And so I think that in those cases, it's locked in. In Stefan's case for this project, obviously that hasn't, you know, we haven't even designed it. So you're right. There could be some cost issues too.
Well, it may be locked in.
I just want to
but-
add to that,
but-
you know, inflation, I've been looking very, very closely. I was in a discussion with Chairman Paul through the agency, and that, you know, inflation is something that, you know, they're looking to move up to 2% as the economy is getting stronger. Obviously, that's going to be an issue, and pricing is always subject to change, but we
Right.
have to counteract. Inflation is one of those things that really makes a difference in the pricing.
That's a very helpful comment too.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Is there anything else on this issue? Okay, let's move on to Sterling Phase 3 valve replacements.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman, members of the board, and members of the CIP committee. I'm here to request authorization to award a construction contract for the replacement of certain valves in Sterling under the project Sterling Phase 3 valve replacements. A little bit about the background of this project. The water system in Sterling was constructed in the 1960s and 1970s. It's the oldest in our system. In the course of preparing or performing repairs and operating and maintaining the system, the O&M divisions determined that certain valves in Sterling are not functioning, and those valves, of course, being in 50 plus years old, are beyond their useful life as well. So we want to replace these valves, and that would be necessary so that we can isolate the system to perform other repairs to the system, because we have this particular area in Sterling, around in Sugarland and along Lincoln Avenue. We've experienced a lot of water line breaks in this area, and when these valves don't function, we have to go back further into the system to isolate to perform the repairs, which impacts more customers. We have performed similar replacements in the past over the past few years. The Phase 1 project was completed in 2019, and Phase 2 was completed last year. Both of those projects were under $100,000, so we did not present those for approval to the board, but those are completed. The locations of the valves are shown in these two maps here along Lincoln Avenue and Sugarland Run. All of these valve replacements are at intersections with other streets, and the contractor will have to implement traffic control measures to perform the work. And of course, the replacement of the valves requires that we take the local system out of service, which will, of course, disrupt service to the customers. And we have a PR work to do there, public notification to go through as well, to inform the customers that their water will be taken out of service temporarily while we replace these valves. One thing I want to add is our contract actually includes a sequencing schedule, so that as the valves are replaced, we will bring those back into service, and we will use the new valves to isolate as necessary to perform subsequent valve replacements. They have to perform the replacements one at a time. They cannot do these all at once. That would be too much for us. And so we have a sequence included in the contract. Have any questions? I don't want to go too fast here. Okay.
I think you haven't discussed yet, but what is the timeline for this project?
We will begin.
Completion. Completion. Sorry, just to be specific.
The construction period is 210 days from the notice to proceed. So we hope to get that notice to proceed issued after board approval sometime here in July, and we get the bonds and insurance certificates from the contractor. So we should complete the job the project in early 2022.
So there, in the interim of that, there will be, consistent disruption that we are, hoping to you provide, public notice for in
Right.
terms of, yeah. Okay, we'll talk more about that as we move
Yeah.
along. I had a few questions, but please go ahead.
Well,
Thank you.
Well, these interruptions, I mean, the valves that we're going to replace at each of those locations will take roughly a half a day or so. So the disruption is really for, be less than 8 hours for sure. So we'll have to turn the water off in those areas for less than 8 hours and put the new valves in, and then we'll bring it back into service.
And Brian, I had a question. So in a case like this, how are we catering for the public in terms of water? I mean, how do we move forward with?
We have to notify them that they will be without water for a short period of time. Right.
Okay.
We do this, I mean, that's just how this work has to be done. You have to temporarily take the water out of service to them.
Okay. You just don't want a lot of disruption from that.
Oh,
for them, so,
absolutely. And we have we provide door hangers, the public notice, 72 hours, 48 hours, whatever in advance. We put out door hangers, and then we'll work with the local supervisor as well to let them know so that they can notify the residents too.
Okay.
So we go through a lot to notify the people.
Sure.
To make sure. And then if there are certain businesses or schools taken out, we will perform that work on the weekend so as not to disrupt that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
I don't
that
think
answers a lot of my questions in that area. Thank you.
Good. I don't think there are any schools in this particular project, but in phase 1 and phase 2, we had some schools that were taken out of service. So,
okay. Thank
Mr.
you.
Sultan, you have a question?
You just answered my question.
Okay. So we prepared the.
Mr. Moody has a question. Sorry, Brian.
That's okay.
Yes. Yeah, Brian, I just was looking at what's on screen here, and the estimate, is that an in-house estimate?
Yes, sir.
The 425, it appears that 3 of the bidders were actually all over the estimate.
Right.
And I wanted to ask, was this solicitation, was this on the BOA? Where is this open?
No, this was a public bid. The BOAs are for our engineering. That's for engineering.
Okay.
This is public construction. Yes, this is for construction.
So that
Yes.
in-house, that was an in-house estimate that was done,
Yep.
the 425K? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We prepared a bid schedule so that the bidders would clearly understand the work at each of these locations, and we prepared an estimate in-house. And that estimate was based on the phase 1 and phase 2 numbers that were just escalated a little bit for existing conditions. So, any other questions? Okay, so we advertised the project in mid-May, and last week we received 4 bids for the project. Madigan Construction was the low bidder for the project at $411,040. The estimate at $425,000. We've worked with Madigan Construction on similar projects in the past. They've done a lot of work for us over the past 6 or 8 years. So we're very comfortable with them. They are a responsive and responsible bidder. This is our CIP snapshot, explaining why we're doing the project, aging infrastructure, and to provide better service and minimize service disruptions to the customers. We're carrying $500,000 in the CIP for this work. Any questions? Okay, this is the recommended motion, and I have one thing I want to add to this. Not add to the motion, but to explain. We are requesting a 10% contingency to cover some risk that we see in this kind of work, and that risk is that once we excavate and expose the pipe, we may have to actually replace more pipe as we're replacing the valves. There's risk there because this pipe is already 50 years old. Some of the soils in Sterling are a little corrosive, and so it can accelerate the deterioration of the pipe. We've also found that in some cases the subgrade is poor and is not stable enough for the construction, and in that case we'll have to undercut and provide some additional bedding material, which is pretty common for this. We find that things weren't constructed 50 or 60 years ago as we would do those now. So we are requesting 10% contingency. Are there any other questions?
Can I get a motion? Well, I'll make the
motion, the recommended motion to that's on the screen now, and to put it on consent agenda for our next board meeting.
I second that motion.
No
Jewel,
other questions?
Can we get a roll call?
Thank you. Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar?
Yes.
And Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Unanimous and placed on consent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Koblis, you have a question, sir?
Yeah, this is a question for Brian, if you're still around. Is there any way through X-ray, or I don't know how, but can we know how, you know, if a pipe is in good shape? I mean, you know, we're having all these problems now that we're getting a system that's 50 years old. Can we go through and X-ray the ground to see if the pipe is going to fail anywhere before it fails? Just if there, I was just wondering if there's any kind of new process that does that.
I do not know of any process to do that. I know that there is a process for some piping systems, like pre-stressed concrete pipe, where you can put some device in it to do a sounding to tell you a little bit about the structural integrity of it. But for this particular pipe, I don't know of anything. The least expensive is to actually just excavate and take a look.
Mr. Moody?
Yeah, hi, Keith. To Mark's point, you mentioned soil sampling. Is there soil sampling taking place to identify areas that soil is more corrosive that would likely create greater chance of pipes being corroded?
We have some information on the soil corrosivity in the Sterling area. This the ductile iron pipe that we use nowadays has a coating system on it, and we typically wrap it in plastic as well to extend the life. And by properly bedding the pipe, we actually help extend the life there as well. So that's how we've sort of addressed it. In some cases, we might, if we find that we've got really corrosive soils or an impressed current or something, we can put in some corrosion protection, and we've done that before as well.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the pipe that you're dealing with is not ductile iron, is it? It's cast iron.
The pipe we're dealing with here is cast iron, yes. Which is no longer even made. It's the ductile iron that we use nowadays is much more durable.
Right.
Cast iron itself is a very brittle pipe, and that's part of the problem there.
Mr. Moe, did you have a comment?
I was just going to mention that, you know, some of the things that we do are this part of our system. It is the area that generates the most main failures over the years because of not just the age, but also the materials of construction, and some of it even goes back to the controls that were in place at the time in the very initial constructed areas. But we do annually survey these areas for potential leaks. So we use ultrasonic technologies to listen for problems and try to identify them before they become major failures. And then, of course, when we do, because we are regularly in this particular area making repairs, we assess. We're able to make direct assessments of the overall integrity of the pipe, and that's how we generally prioritize our replacement program, is by making these observations of the areas where we're seeing the most failures, making general condition assessments of the exposed pipes, and then put them on the list for the next phase of our replacement program. And we'll be talking more about replacements again on the next wave of that program. Something else, just real quickly, So this program, this valve replacement program, does a few things for us. It not only means that when we have a failure, we're able to more tightly isolate the problem because we have valves that we can now rely on that will isolate the segments that need to be addressed. But it also sets us up in a better way for the replacements that come later because now we have valves we know we can rely on and we can isolate the areas that need to be isolated for those for the next replacement program. So it really will be setting the stage for a much more efficient replacement coming up in the as we move forward. So just a couple of thoughts there.
Ms. Kennel, did you have a comment?
I did. Actually, it was along the lines of where Roddy was going, because I think it's to the benefit of the members to understand that exactly what Roddy just said. This is the oldest part of our system, and some of our neighboring utilities have been undertaking programs of significant replacement. And I'm referencing WSSC in particular. You know, they have a much older system than we do. And some of those neighborhoods, actually, I live in one that is about the same vintage as this Sterling neighborhood. And literally, they went through and replaced all of the piping throughout the entire neighborhood. So Brian showed you that map, the network with the valve locations on it. But in this particular circumstance, the cheaper and easier thing to do, rather than trying to identify where the problems were, because there was a repeated pattern of leakage and breaks. And so it just made more sense to go back in and they changed the material, actually. So they went from what had been a metal pipe that was, you know, potentially subject to corrosivity and degradation over time, and they actually installed plastic piping in this in the neighborhood that I'm talking about. And they did it over a number of years, believe it or not, because it was a very they didn't want to cut off everybody's water, back to Ms. Sursakar's point. And so, you know, once we get into that vintage of piping as a utility, we're going to be looking at that sort of thing as well. And I think it's, you know, we keep kind of monitoring what others are doing and the techniques that they're using to replace these pipes. But what Roddy's talking about is we're taking a much more proactive approach to planning this out. We're tracking things much nicer. We've developed some nice dashboards that could be interesting to share with you. And in a separate conversation that we've had recently, it may be time to bring forward an update on the asset management program that operations is working on, because this really is an operations system improvement. That was my comment. Thanks.
Ms. Sursakar, you have a
Yeah,
question?
I'll just be very brief in the essence of time. I brought this as since I've been on the board. I brought this, you know, topic and this issue over and over again. Deterioration of infrastructure is a national problem. Something that keeps me up at night as a citizen of the United States, because I know where, you know, in terms of where are we going to get the money, you know, we don't have a swell of money, you know, that's sitting over there. It's a crisis in itself, and you know, and I'm glad we're dealing with it, but yes, it does keep me up at night. You know, where are we going to get this, you know, this budget, this pool of money? Because if we start fixing everything all at once, it puts a stress on all of us, you know, as citizens of this country. But you know, I'm very interested in that topic. It's near and dear to me, and I'm glad I'm on the board and we're talking about that today because it's a serious concern. And to Mark's point, we should be able to get new technologies in place. I mean, fixing the infrastructure is one component that we need to deal with. Obviously, that, you know, it's a need for us nationally, but we should be looking at different technologies that are able to avert this issue, but it provides this sort of a prevention better than a cure type of a situation as well. So it's some really, you know, fruitful, deep thinking that we're doing here today, and it's very, very important. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. I'm glad to be part of this conversation.
Okay, are there any other thoughts, questions? Okay, the next thing is a capital spending report.
Mr. Kobliss, you have a comment?
Yeah, maybe I think Roddy was probably going to say about the exact same thing. We are very, Angeline, we are very fortunate that our system is very new. I mean, technically, we are much newer than almost all the rest of the systems in the area. Yes, Sterling Park is an area, and I know we've already started replacing the piping in that area, but everything else is relatively new for water systems. Obviously, it's between 30 and 40 years old, but basically only Sterling Park is the area that's more than 50 years old. Roddy, probably you can tell me more or expound.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think it's both the the age of the material, but also the materials of construction. And there was a defined line, and we see it very clearly if we show you the break history map. It's very concentrated on those areas that we just showed. It's amazing how that vividly jumps out at you. Those are where all the failures are occurring, and it's because of the materials and the vintage. And so, we're fortunate, as you said, and we change materials of construction, and in our wastewater system particularly, we have pipe going in the ground that there is no reason why it shouldn't last well over 100 years. And so, manholes may be a little bit different issue, but they're a lot easier to access and address. So I think it's probably a good time for us to maybe bring back to you our asset management program, as Pam was suggesting, to give you that confidence that we're very proactive in our approach to this, and we stay well ahead of the curve relative to our neighbors, and I think you can feel pretty assured that we're on top of this.
Mr.
Very
Sultan
quickly
and then
here,
Ms. Sursakar.
Yeah, I
the
think,
asset
I
management
think
program,
we
very
should
quickly,
get
and
a
we'll talk.
presentation on the asset management program. But more importantly, we're fortunate that we don't have the pipe that WSSC and Fairfax have, pre-stressed concrete pipe. As far as I know, we don't have any of that in our system, and that was a
We
real
inherited
product.
Right. Well, we did inherit the segment that is along the Washington Old Dominion Trail when we acquired that alignment from the city of Fairfax. That is pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe that goes between, from the Goose Creek plant out to the county line now within our system.
Is that the early vintage pipe?
No, it is not the Pace product that you're referring to that had the problems with the pre-stressed wire. So we're also fortunate in that regard. It's not been problematic. It's been looked at several times, and everything indicates that it's in great shape. So the other thing about that pipeline is that it's not a critical piece of our infrastructure. I mean, it's a nice backup system to have in place, and it cuts right through the heart of our system. So we're very happy to have it because it helps our redundancy and resiliency. But if it were to go down, had to be isolated, our system is set up in a way where it wouldn't be hardly noticed, to be honest with you. But it's nice to have in cases we lose other transmission capabilities.
Is that along the bike path?
That's correct. That's the old Fairfax City main that went from the Goose Creek plant originally all the way into Fairfax City, and we have acquired the segment that takes it from the Goose Creek plant to the county line there.
Hey, as an avid bike rider, you can't let that pipe fail.
Yeah.
Ms.
Okay.
Sursakar.
Yeah, so the asset management program is a very salient feature, and I can just see the value of that. With that being said, I speak for myself on the board, would like to know more about that. Is there a report out there that you can sort of bring to our attention, and I would just like to read that report, or is it just an ongoing program that's still sort of in the developmental phase?
It's a program that's being developed, but it's matured a great deal in the last 3-4 years, and I think we presented on it maybe 18 months ago or so as an update, and it's probably a good opportunity somewhere in the next several months to get it on the docket for a refresh. And we can prepare. There are definitely dashboards and reports that are generated from the program that we can also share with you as helpful information.
Thank you. I'll make a note of that and I look forward to that.
Mr. Kelly, you have a question?
Yeah, hi, Mitchell. Thank you. Just stating, at the risk of stating the obvious, it's just a reminder that too, as part of that, we're going to have some sort of presentation or information on asset quality, asset management program. We should also include the ongoing repair and maintenance budget that we have. We've often been, the authority has often been looked at in the past. Gee, you guys got a lot of cash on the balance sheet. Well, yeah, we have that cash for ongoing repairs and maintenance and upgrades and so forth. We need to have that reserve. So to your point, Angeline, the money is set aside every year to take care of these infrastructure upgrades or repairs that come about. Thanks. That's all I had.
Sean, to your point, that's perfect timing because what we've talked about is we're in the middle of going through a rate study. And so we would have a rate workshop with the board in the fall. Prior to that, Elton and I actually just yesterday talked about a presentation on the asset management and R&R piece of it so that we can see how that fits in to the whole rate model and how it affects what we're doing. And so it's perfect timing and you hit it right on the head.
Are there any questions about the capital spending report?
Mr. Sultan, if you'd like, I can just spend a few moments just taking a quick look at it, and then I can see if there's any questions. I see Mr. Kovlis.
I would look at there's one or two that are lower than the rest. You may want to mention a couple of points on those.
Sure, Mr. Kovlis, you want to ask your question?
It's not necessarily a question. It's more of a comment. I am so pleased that this red line is near the blue line seems like the first time in 12 years since I've been here. You guys are doing a great job. I really notice it. And I don't know if it's because nobody's in the office that we're getting closer to the blue line or what, but I'm just so impressed that we're near the blue line.
Well, thank you for that. One of the things we sometimes lose the perspective on and is that blue line is actually part of our CIP budgeting process. And that blue line, to be honest with you, was actually created around the September-October timeframe of last year. I know we ultimately present the CIP to you in November, and then it gets ultimately finally approved by the board in December. But the data that's used to create that spending curve is actually compiled and reviewed in the September-October timeframe. So it isn't, it isn't a forecast that's put together on a month-by-month basis. And so to align with it, it does require a lot of the projects to be moving forward at how you envision them. And we talk a lot about how things do affect our projects, a lot of things that sometimes have the impact to slow them down if they're in the design phase as we get into the issues with land and permits and so forth. But a lot of that spending is in construction projects. And this year, I think we're seeing, and it was going to be one of my comments, and maybe to a comment that Mr. Sultan was making, that you see the broad run WRF category in the table spending, higher than its projection was for this time of the year. And you also see that in the water category. You see both of those showing 131 and 118% as actuals for May as compared to what their projection was. And those are indications really of these two construction projects, the expansion going on at Broad Run, and as Pam mentioned, the water line that is being built across the Goose Creek. So when those construction projects are moving ahead, which is always a great sign for us, it really has the ability to affect that spending curve more than anything else does. So yeah, we're all pleased with that. Actually, as I was looking back, in May of last year, we actually were at 97%, believe it or not, in May of last year, but the spending was lower. It was at 24 million last year. And right now we've even spent more money than we did at this time last year. We're spending about 27 million. It's just a projection. Last year was a little lower, so that made the percentage a little bit more accurate. But 90% is roughly where we are, just slightly below that. And it's a number that, as we see that, then we feel like that our spending is fairly aligned with that budget. Again, especially with the perspective that that budget number was established some time ago. A couple of the areas that are, as Mr. Sultan noted, there's a couple programs that from a percentage wise are spending below the projection. The dollar value delta is not that great when you look at those in the Potomac water supply. Although it's at 56%, it's about a total net of about $200,000. And it's fairly typical. We have some projects that are spending a little bit faster than we anticipated, as we just talked about. And some of the other things that affect some of the projects, the spending lags a little bit compared to what we were hoping. When we come back together in August, that'll be the next time that you all come back together as the CIP committee. We'll have a mid-year reforecast of these numbers and a reprojection for the second half of the year. From what we're seeing right now, spending on the first half of the year, it looks fairly typical to what we've seen in other years of being sort of in that 90% range. So I imagine our reprojection will also probably be reflective of that and won't look too terribly different from reprojections in past years. And we'll probably reproject that we'll be somewhere in that 85 to 90% range. But we'll know better than that as we go through that process in the next few months and bring that forward in August. So I don't know if there's any specific questions, Mr. Sultan, if you had any specific questions about any of the specific programs. I might be able to see if I can answer what might be impacting something, and if not, then we can certainly bring that forward when we talk again in August.
No, it was just a general question. I will tell you this, that Mark is right. You guys are doing a fantastic job. When I was with Fairfax, we never met figures like this. Are there any other questions? Okay, Jewel, let's move on to the next.
Thank you.
So that would be to adjourn. Oh, I see Mr. Kobus has a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to make sure this isn't Roddy's last CIP meeting.
Hard to tell at this point.
They're kicking you out early, huh?
Well, they could. You never know. But we'll see if Carla wants me to attend the next one. No, I should be here still at the next meeting.
Well, if not, thanks a lot again.
Oh, you're welcome.
You'll be here.
If you're going to be here, that's very good news.
Yeah.
Roddy, we're going to tie your legs to your desk chair, buddy.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Jim Bonko, so moved.
Second?
Yeah, Keith, second.
Jewel, can I have a roll call?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar?
Yes.
Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Adjourned at 8:58 a.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a nice
Thanks,
summer.
everyone. Have a good day.
Thank